They did two things here. The second part was the beginning of showing how Donald Trump's tweets and directives led directly to the violence. And so I'm going to come back to that because that was at the end. But let's start with the first part. The first part was, all right, what were the series of events that led to Donald Trump deciding to go down basically the violent path on January 6th? Okay. So obviously we have the election in November. Then they have 61 court cases. They lose 60 of them. We've talked about that a lot on the Young Turks. Right-wing media has talked about it, zero. So they never, ever talk about Donald Trump losing 60 cases. And Hirschman, one of his Trump's lawyers in the testimony today, said that he kept challenging the lunatic team, right? There was Team Normal and Team Lunatic, Sidney Powell, Rudy Giuliani, etc. So why didn't you guys win the cases? Why didn't you have any evidence? And he said, Powell said, oh, well, the judges are corrupt. And Hirschman said, they're all corrupt, including the guys we nominated, that Trump nominated. They're all corrupt, all 60 of them. No, of course it was absurd. So I'm going to get to that fateful meeting in a second. So they do the cases. They lose everything, okay? They're obliterated in the courts. Here in the hearings, they showed excellent evidence of Rudy Giuliani saying, yeah, we don't have any evidence. He told that to an Arizona legislator. Maybe we'll get it later. I mean, absurd, right? This is lunatic stuff. Maybe we'll get it later. We don't have any evidence now. Bernie's legal team, including Bernie Carrick, Rudy's legal team. Bernie Carrick is a criminal from New York. He used to be the head cop, and then he was busted and went to jail. So he's perfect for these goons. And he's a terrible, awful, corrupt guy. But even he writes in his papers like, well, we don't have the evidence. We don't have it. But, maybe, again, same idea. Maybe we'll get it later. Okay, no evidence, none, zero. And even Team Lunatic knew that they had no evidence. In fact, at least to Sidney Powell. Now, this one we knew before, and we showed it on Young Turks, but they showed it in this context, and they've done an excellent job of assembling the evidence here. So Sidney Powell, when she's sued by Dominion, she says in her own lawsuit, no reasonable person would believe that what I was saying was a statement of fact. No reasonable person would believe that what I was saying was a statement of fact. That's Sidney Powell in actual court when our ass is on the line. Not jibber-jabbering on TV, not doing conspiracy theories, but when she actually has to go to court. She said she knows that what she was saying was so maniacally wrong and stupid and outrageous that nobody would ever believe her, except for the fact that Donald Trump did believe her. So we're going to come back to him being patient zero in a second. So, but between the election and December 14th, they lose everything. They're obliterated. They have no evidence. They tried everything. But at that point, by the way, this is important. People like Pat Cipollone, who's the White House counsel, Bill Barr, who's the Attorney General, so many others that are in his inner circle, they're listening to all these wild theories one by one. And they're like, okay, let's see. Do we have evidence? Don't we have evidence? Can we keep Trump in office? And they listen to all of it and they realize, no, it's just junk. I mean, one of the theories is the ghost of Hugo Chavez, who died 7 years ago in Venezuela, rigged elections. I mean, it is literally cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. These are certifiable lunatics, right? So Cipollone concludes, and his testimony was devastating testimony was included in these hearings just now, that no, they have no evidence at all. This is completely contrived, totally made up. We've got to concede it's over. But when did they reach that conclusion? They reach it on December 14th, because that is when the votes get certified. It is over. From December 14th on, the rest is just traditions and rituals with no legal importance. December 14th has legal importance. That is when the states certify the Electoral College and say that is it. Joe Biden has won. Donald Trump has lost. It is definitive. It is over, right? So at that point, Cipollone, Barr, and the others come in and go, well, we gave it a go old college try, but it's over. We lost, right? And Trump says no. So on December 18th, they have what they described in detail in these hearings, the unhinged hearing, okay? The unhinged meeting in the private residence of the White House. Apparently there's a room there where they also do meetings called the Yellow Oval. It's the Oval Office in the private residence. Okay, so at that point, that meeting is so crazy that almost a physical fight breaks out. So one of Trump's White House lawyers says to either Rudy or Flynn or one of them, he's like, look, if you want to keep yelling at me, step up. He just says, okay, the guy with the bat in the background that says justice on it. Okay, remember, everyone here is total right-wingers. They're all lifelong Republicans. There isn't a conservative Democrat in the room, let alone a liberal, let alone a progressive. Okay, everyone is deep right-wing, right? But Hirschman's the guy with the bat in the background. And Hirschman finally says, look, what do you want to do? You want to fight? Let's go, right? And so they're yelling at each other at the top of their lungs. And it's because they had snuck into the White House. And even Mark Meadows at the very end of the insane unhinged meeting has to personally walk out Rudy Giuliani from the White House all the way to the gate because he's afraid that Rudy's going to sneak back into the White House. I mean, these guys are totally nuts. You're going to sneak back into the White House to see Trump? I think unbelievable, right? So, but here's what we know. Cipollone, Barr at this point, Hirschman, and this is super important, and Mark Meadows. We find out from Cipollone today, Mark Meadows definitively thought there is no evidence. We lost. But he's stuck in the middle. I mean, there's now reports out that Mark Meadows might have literally been having a nervous breakdown on January 6th. I mean, he's trying to please the Mad King, Donald Trump. But at the same time, he knows that the guy is lying. He definitively knows it, right? And that he's listening to goddamn lunatics. Even for Mark Meadows, Mark Meadows was the head of the Freedom Caucus, the most fringe, radical right-wing group in Congress. And he's like, well, but we lost, didn't we? This is crazy, right? So he's desperately trying not to testify because he doesn't want to be on the record saying that. But everyone in the room with him, including the White House counsel, is like, nope, Mark Meadows definitely also thought that. So, look, I'm going to give you a couple of quick things here, but what happens after the meeting is critical. So I'm going to get to that in a second. So Cipollone yells at the lunatic squad, where's the evidence? They have no answer. The people in the meeting describe it as unhinged. On Team Lunatic is Sidney Powell, Rudy Giuliani, Michael Flynn, and Patrick Byrne, the Overstock guy. Cipollone sees him and he's like, who the hell are you? Why is the random CEO or founder of Overstock.com here? Because they've collected every lunatic in the country. So, and that is the meeting where they say, let's seize the machines. Let's just grab the machines. And Donald Trump says, and he even tries to make Sidney Powell special counsel that would be in charge, and this was an earlier reference in the beginning of the hearing, to grabbing the machines and just saying we won. And by the way, this is also important. And anyone who disagrees is subject to civil and criminal punishment. That's just a coup, man. That is putting your political opponents in, seizing the machines, seizing the form of democracy, putting your political opponents in jail, and just absolutely trashing democracy in the U.S. Constitution. Bill Barr, when this is brought to him and saying, okay, go seize the machines because you're the attorney general. He's like, no, we are not going to seize machines. Those are states' rights. We're conservatives. The states have a right to say who won their election in their states. We have no right. The federal government needs probable cause to do anything the attorney general does. We have no cause at all because you have no evidence. And you want me to go illegally seize the machines from the states as the federal government? No, I am not going to do that. And then, of course, Trump is furious. So at the end of this meeting that is unhinged by every account, Cipollone said, seizing the election machines, quote, there was no legal authority, quote, it was a terrible idea for the country. Even Jason Miller, a deep supporter of Donald Trump to this day, say that there was no evidence was, quote, a massive understatement. They all know there's no evidence. So Donald Trump is patient zero. He is the lunatic who keeps looking for conspiracy theories, who's looking to cheat, who's looking to destroy democracy. Every massive right-winger around him, including some of his top aides and top allies, are like, no, Mr. President, we cannot destroy democracy. This is crazy. So he collects this small team of lunatics who are like, I don't see it. I don't think it's crazy at all. And Michael Flynn's talking about bringing martial law. They didn't talk about that in these hearings, but we covered that earlier. They're talking about seizing machines. They're talking about ending America. So he found four lunatics, who later in court said, well, of course we didn't believe it. We didn't think any lunatic would believe us. And Trump's like, I believe it. So they do all of this. And so at this point, look, I wrote unsupported by the evidence, but like 3 different witnesses that are super close to Trump all said everything was unsupported by the evidence. So, okay. So the December 18th meeting ends late into the night. Now it's the morning of December 19th. And Trump puts out the fateful tweet about how come on January 6th, it's going to be wild. Now, look, guys, here's the important context here, because wild could be interpreted in 100 different ways, right? So, I mean, obviously, we've all seen that tweet forever. But when I first saw it, I'm not sure that I interpreted it as something that was outrageous and a call to violence. But what they showed was all of the radicals, both in the comment section, which is, of course, not indicative of everyone, it's just indicative of those particular people, but also talk show hosts and also leaders of different right-wing movements. They all interpreted it as a call for violence. And they were super excited. They weren't like, oh my God, I can't believe the president's calling for violence and maybe a coup. They were like, yes, finally, the violence we were waiting for. And all of their comments are super clear as laid out in the hearings. Bring gallows, bring nooses, bring knives, bring bats. This is go time. This is time for the second Civil War. It's time for white people to take over. I mean, it is just explicit. Now, guys, that's why I say the context is important. If Bernie Sanders said, hey, come to a wild protest on any given day, literally, I think literally no one, but certainly, I mean, if it was anyone, it would be a minuscule percentage. But in effect, literally no one would think, oh, Bernie's calling for violence. Because Bernie's never called for violence. The progressives are against violence. Nobody would think, oh, Bernie says, hey, come to a wild protest. Oh, I'm going to bring bats and knives and you know and rifles, no, and nooses. Nobody would think that. Nobody would think that, because we don't do that on the left, and so we certainly don't do it in the progressive camp. It wouldn't even occur to anyone. But when Trump says to his right-wing audience, it's going to be wild, they're like, yes, time for violence, and they very clearly said. Now, that's in December 19th. They showed clips of different folks like Alex Jones, etc. And so from December 19th on to January 6th, at that point, the leaders of the extreme right-wing movements and the extreme right-wing talk shows, they all knew that it was a call for violence. And they were planning and preparing for violence. And Team Lunatic knew that. And did Trump ever say, whoa, no, of course we're going to have a protest, you know, protests are as American as apple pie, but hey, everybody remember, peaceful, nonviolent, etc. I mean, so sometimes on the show I'll do an analogy, and for example, they mentioned Red Wedding. One of the YouTubers, right-wing YouTubers, mentioned it. Like Red Wedding references could be just passing, it could be a joke. It depends on the context, right? It's not necessarily a big deal. But when he was talking about Red Wedding, he was talking about violence, and he was explicit about it. And so the Trump's side sees all this stuff. If I saw it and I made a passing reference like, oh, we're going to go kick their ass, I always say politically, because I mean it. Doing anything physical is defeat. It's a defeat in the battle of ideas. It's giving up. It's surrendering, saying, I'm not as smart as you. My point is not as good as yours. So I'm going to have to resort to violence like an ape, right? But for the right wing, they're like, that's normal. That's Tuesday, right? So when they hear wild, they hear violence. And then at that point, it is super incumbent on the president to say, No. Not violence, not physical. But he never does it. He encourages them and goads them. So the evidence that they laid out here, that his entire inner circle knew with absolute certainty that the claims of election fraud were nonsense, unhinged, ridiculous, no evidence at all. They all told Trump. And Trump said, I don't care. At one point, Rudy Giuliani says that he called them the team normal for not fighting. He literally used that word in his testimony. And like a normal person would go, hey, Rudy, are you nuts? No, they're giving you their legal opinion, their political opinion, depending on who the person is. And Trump looks at him and goes, yeah, that's right. Okay, you guys aren't fighting hard enough for me. Because what people can't get through their head is, one, Trump believes in conspiracy theories. He is a certifiable lunatic. The right wing in this country has been following a literal madman. So you tell him an insane conspiracy theory, and he will definitely believe it. Okay? I've been saying this for 4 or 5 years, 6 years now. And people are like, oh, no, you're just hyperbole and you're just opposed to him politically. No, guys, look at what he says on a daily basis. Inject bleach into your lungs. Wind noise causes cancer. He thinks that if you exercise, you're using up the energy of your life and you'll die sooner. Guy's a lunatic. He's been so stupid and so crazy his entire life. So finally, people in power are like, turns out he's the crazy one. He's patient zero. Of course. The whole hearings I wanted to yell, of course. So finally, at least people in power are beginning to understand. And then they always make the mistake of projecting. They think, well, there's a line. Everybody's got a line, right? No, you have a line. Trump has no line. They think, well, of course you're going to want to preserve democracy. There's bounds of reason. No, there are no bounds of reason. Trump doesn't care about democracy at all. If you told him if you tell me, hey, Cenk, something's going to go wrong for you, but we're going to keep democracy, or we're going to lose democracy, but you're going to be in charge. That's a no-brainer. Who cares about me? Of course I say good, keep democracy. And I think that honestly, a lot of the right, to be fair to the right wing, and those Republicans that were in his inner circle, they, I think, seem to, based on their testimony, seem to assume, well, obviously democracy is our line. We're not going to do an actual coup and destroy democracy. And they assume that Trump thought the same thing. No, he doesn't. He would, and he did try to destroy democracy without a second thought. If you tell Trump you are democracy, he'd think that was the most ridiculous question you ever heard. It's like, of course me, he would think. What kind of a sucker or a loser would care about America or the Constitution or democracy? He never cared about any of those things. He still doesn't care about it. By the way, one thing about this is, in a sense, so what happened was an absolute disaster. But the silver lining is that finally the people in power, both Republicans and Democrats, are understanding what we've been saying all along. No, you're not getting it. The guy is not normal. He would declare himself king in a second. He hates the idea of democracy and sharing power and having to ask other people. He said it to himself 1,000 times. So when I go to North Korea, when the leader comes in, they all stand up and applaud. That's great. It should be like that in America. No one is allowed to disagree with him. No, that's not how it should be in America. That's a dictatorship. He definitely wants to be dictator, and he tried to be dictator. He tried to do an actual coup against America. So this is what we've been saying based on the publicly available evidence already, but now they're actually proving it in these public hearings, and maybe, just maybe, it'll get through the thick heads of both political figures in Washington, in both Democratic and Republican parties, because they kept assuming decency where there was none in Donald Trump, and a shared values when there are none. There's only one value that Donald Trump has, himself, period. So now the question is it going to actually affect Republican voters? That's what it always comes back to. And remember, and right now there's a New York Times poll out that says this morning, that 25% of Republicans say they will not vote for Donald Trump in a primary. And so it's not that big a deal, right? I'm not going to vote for Biden in a primary, so it's not like, wow, we got him. But 25% seem to be saying, no, we're done with Trump. There's no way that they would vote for him. So this is the tiny progress in the Republican Party. Like, we lost the whole party, man. Now, I'm not talking about the politicians. Politicians are bad in a different way. They're corrupt, and they're worse than the voters in a lot of ways. But the Republican voters are more maniacal. They don't really, 3/4 of them have seen all of this. They haven't seen all the hearings, and they assiduously avoid the hearings. They don't want to see the hearings, right? If they see the hearings, it's going to be uncomfortable. Oh, no evidence. And everybody knew there was no evidence. They don't want to hear that. They want to hear pleasing things like white people should be in charge. Christians should be in charge. You should be in charge. Everybody should know their role. And it should be like the good old days. Let's make America great again, like when we were in charge and only us. And we exercise our power over others. Most Republicans genuinely believe that. They're voters. And so when Trump says, I don't care what reality is, I don't need no stinking evidence, and I don't even care about democracy. What do a lot of Republican voters say now? Oh, yeah, no, we're not a democracy anyway. We're a republic. Well, okay, but a republic based on people's voting, right? So hence the word democracy. No. Oh, all of a sudden, no. All of a sudden, no. They're Christian nationalists, man. So anyways, but at least 1/4 of Republicans already, even without today's hearings, are at a point where they're like, no, Moss, I just can't take this anymore. And apparently they're not on Team Lunatic, which is, by the way, great to hear. Great to hear. It turns out 1/4 of Republicans are not crazy. So for everybody in Washington that still has an old way of thinking, oh, Republicans are legitimate. Republican voters are the most American people. This is a center-right country. Republican voters, and they worship them. No, I'm right. The overwhelming majority of them don't even like the concept of democracy, don't even like the concept of America, and they've never read our Constitution. If they read it, they would hate it, other than the Second Amendment. By the way, even if they read the Second Amendment, they realized that it has to be a well-regulated militia, they would hate the Second Amendment. They never read a goddamn thing. They hate our Constitution. They don't care. But apparently 1/4 of them do. Maybe I'm wrong. And maybe they were just, had blinders on, and they love democracy in America, but they thought, that Trump was actually in favor of that, and they were misled. Maybe we'll get another 10% of Republicans. Maybe we'll get a whole 50% of Republicans by the end. You'll never get more than 50% of Republicans. Give up that hope. 50% of Republican voters love the idea of Donald Trump destroying what this country stands for, and instead doing white nationalism and Christian nationalism. That's their bread and butter. That's why they're Republicans. That's why they've loved Trump. That's why they love Trump to this day. And the more you tell them that he's a white and Christian nationalist, the more they like him. The more that you tell them that he's detached from reality, the more they like him. The more that you say that he's against democracy, he's going to just put them in charge and give them all the power, the more they like it. The question is somewhere between 25 and 50% of Republicans. How much of that can you whittle down so that Trump has a chance at losing a primary? And because if he wins the Republican primary, Joe Biden couldn't beat anybody. Joe Biden is going to lose. I mean, if he runs, he's going to get annihilated by any Republican outside of Trump. And there's an excellent chance he'd lose to Trump. Half the polls have him losing to Trump today. And Trump is, as we just described, a verifiable, certifiable lunatic. So we can't, for the good of the country, Trump cannot win that primary. But right now, it's still an open question. But these hearings have been devastating. You should definitely watch them. And by the way, we're always live when the hearings are on. So come watch it with us. We do play-by-play. And as they're coming back in now, we're going to do more play-by-play. Whenever you see that on, come to youtube.com/theyoung
will be in order.
For you. Thanks for watching The Young Turks. Really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.